Good morning, friends. Welcome to Sutta Study with Bhante Suddhaso. Hello to Michael, Jens, Ela, and Edward. This morning we will be studying the Chula Saccaka Sutta, the lesson discourse to Saccaka. Did I mispronounce it? Possibly, Bhante smiles with my Italian Pali. Palialian. And welcome to Lilia and Gita. So there's a link in the live chat where you can find the sutta translated by Bhante on his website. And if you have any questions, as usual, you're welcome to put them in the live chat and Bhante will answer them after he explains the sutta. All right, we can start now.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good morning, friends. Today we'll be looking at the first half of the Chula Saccaka Sutta, so Majjhima Nikaya number 35. So as usual, I'll read through the sutta and periodically I'll stop to give some explanations. And we'll pause about halfway through for questions and then finish the rest tomorrow. So the sutta begins. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Vesali in the great grove at the peaked roof hall. Now on that occasion, Saccaka Nigantaputta was living at Vesali. So Saccaka was a member of the Nigantas. So the Nigantas was a religious order which was the predecessor of the modern day Jain religion. So Jainism is the modern day descendant of the Nigantas. The Nigantas were quite popular at the time of the Buddha. So there's many suttas which record debates between the Buddha and various Nigantas. There's many suttas where the Buddha refutes various Niganta doctrines. There are certain similarities between some aspects of Niganta teachings, Jain teachings, and Buddhist teachings, but there's some quite dramatic differences. So one of the main differences is that although both Buddhism and Jainism teach karma, in Buddhism only intentional actions are considered to be karmically potent. And unintentional actions are not considered to be karmically potent. Whereas in Jainism, both intentional and unintentional actions are considered equally powerful. That's one of the main differences between the two. There's a number of other differences which come up in various suttas. But for the sake of this one, it's enough just to know that Saccaka was a Niganta. He was a follower of the predecessor of Jainism. So Saccaka Nigantaputta was living at Vesali. He was a debater, a clever orator considered a saint by much of the populace. He spoke this statement all around Vesali. I do not see any contemplative or holy man, a leader of a community, a teacher of a group, even one claiming to be a fully enlightened arahant, who would not tremble, quiver, shake, and emit sweat from their armpits when engaged in debate with me. Even if I were to engage a senseless post in debate, it would tremble, quiver, and shake when engaged in debate with me. What can be said of a human being? So apparently he had a high opinion of himself. He thought he was this amazing debater. And he was highly respected and very well known. Then Venerable Assaji, Venerable Assaji was one of the Buddha's first disciples. Then Venerable Assaji, after dressing in the morning and taking his bowl and robe, entered Vesali for alms. While walking in Vaisali for exercise, Saccaka saw Venerable Assaji coming from afar. After seeing this, he approached Venerable Assaji and conversed with him. After engaging in the appropriate polite conversation, he stood to one side. While he was standing to one side, Saccaka said to Venerable Assaji, "Sir Assaji, how does the contemplative Gotama guide his disciples? What is the usual instruction given amidst the contemplative Gotama's disciples?" And Assaji replies, Agivesana. Now, Agivesana was probably Saccaka's family name or his clan name. So it was common at the time of the Buddha to address somebody by their family name or their clan name rather than by their given name. So Venerable Assaji replies, Agivesana, it is in this way that the Blessed One guides his disciples, and this is the usual instruction given amidst the Blessed One's disciples. Monks, the body is impermanent, feelings are impermanent, recognition is impermanent, thoughts are impermanent, consciousness is impermanent. Monks, the body is not self, feelings are not self, recognition is not self, thoughts are not self, consciousness is not self. All conditions are impermanent, all phenomena are not self. Agivesana, it is in this way that the Blessed One guides his disciples, and this is the usual instruction given amidst the Blessed One's disciples. So this is a fairly concise summary of some central Buddhist teachings. So emphasizing that the 5 components of body and mind, the 5 khandhas, are impermanent and not self, not who we are. And that all sankharas, all conditional phenomena, are impermanent and all things are impersonal. So standard Buddhist teaching. Saccaka replies, "Oh, Sir Assaji, that is unpleasant to hear, what we have heard of the contemplative Gotama's doctrine. Perhaps at some point we will meet with Sir Gotama and there might be some conversation, and perhaps we can separate him from that harmful perspective." So Saccaka does not approve of the Buddha's teachings, apparently. And he believes that if he can debate with the Buddha, then he can convince the Buddha that Saccaka's right and the Buddha's wrong. The sutta continues. Now on that occasion, about 500 Lichavis were gathered together in the assembly hall on account of something to be done. Then Saccaka approached those Lichavis and said to them, "May the Lichavi gentlemen come forth. May the Lichavi gentlemen come forth. Today I will have a conversation with the contemplative Gotama. If the contemplative Gotama maintains the same position that a certain famous disciple of his, the monk Assaji, has maintained, then just as a strong man might seize a long-haired goat by its hair and pull it around, in the same way I will pull the contemplative Gotama around using words. Just as a strong pool worker might toss a pool mat in a lake, grasp one corner and shake it up and down and beat it down, in the same way I will shake the contemplative Gotama up and down and beat him down using words. Just as a 60-year-old elephant might plunge into a deep pond and play the hemp washing game, in the same way I will play the hemp washing game with the contemplative Gotama. May the Lichavi gentlemen come forth. May the Lichavi gentlemen come forth. Today I will have a conversation with the contemplative Gotama." So the Lichavis were one of the perhaps ethnic groups at the time of the Buddha. They come up in a number of suttas as being a distinctive group of people, but we don't know much about them. So here we have Saccaka bragging about how he's going to thoroughly defeat the Buddha in debate. Those of us who are Buddhists are already smiling because we know that this is not going to go well for him. And then it says, some of the Lichavis there thought, how could the contemplative Gotama refute Saccaka's doctrine? Saccaka will refute the contemplative Gotama's doctrine. Some of the other Lichavis thought, How could Sir Saccaka refute the Blessed One's doctrine? The Blessed One will refute Saccaka's doctrine. Then Saccaka approached the peaked roof hall in the great forest, surrounded by about 500 lichavis. So I find this really amusing. So like Saccaka, like marching to the monastery with this throng of hundreds of supporters to go and debate the Buddha. To see them all marching up to the monastery. And it says, on this occasion, several monks were walking in the open air. So they're most likely doing walking meditation. The Pali word is chankamati, which means walking meditation. Then Saccaka approached those monks and said to them, Sir, where does Sir Gotama currently reside? We want to see Sir Gotama. And the monk replies, Agivesana, the Blessed One has entered this great forest and is seated at the root of a certain tree for the day's abiding. Then Saccaka entered the great forest with a large company of lichavis. So this indicates, by the way, that not all the lichavis went with him, that some of them apparently decided not to go deeper in the forest to look for the Buddha. So we're not sure at this point how many are still following along with Saccaka. But it's probably less than the 500 that he started with. So then Saccaka entered the great forest with a large company of lichavis, approached the Blessed One, and conversed with him. After engaging in the appropriate polite conversation, he sat to one side. Some of the lichavis paid respects to the Blessed One and sat to one side. Some conversed with the Blessed One, and after engaging in the appropriate polite conversation, sat to one side. Some extended their hands in Anjali towards the Blessed One and sat to one side. Some announced their name and clan in the Blessed One's presence and sat to one side. Some remained silent and sat to one side. In other words, some of them respected the Buddha and some of them not so much. Some of them were probably Buddhists already, and many or most of them were not. So the sutta continues. While he was seated to one side, Saccaka said to the Blessed One, I might ask Sir Gotama about a particular issue, if Sir Gotama will make an opportunity for answering my question. The Buddha replies, Agivesana, ask what you wish. Saccaka asks, how does Sir Gotama guide his disciples? What is the usual instruction given amidst Sir Gotama's disciples? And the Buddha replies, Agivesana, I guide my disciples in this way, and this is the usual instruction given amidst my disciples. Monks, the body is impermanent, feelings are impermanent, recognition is impermanent, thoughts are impermanent, consciousness is impermanent. Monks, the body is not self, feelings are not self, recognition is not self, thoughts are not self, consciousness is not self. All conditions are impermanent, all phenomena are not self. Agivesana, it is in this way that I guide my disciples, and this is the usual instruction given amidst my disciples. So he gives the same statement that Asaji had said earlier in the sutta. And Saccaka replies, a simile occurs to me, Sir Gotama. Then let it occur, Agivesana, the Blessed One said. And Saccaka says, it is like this, Sir Gotama. These seeds and plants attain increased growth and abundance. All of them are dependent on earth. All are established on earth. In this way, these seeds and plants attain increased growth and abundance. It is like this, Sir Gotama. There are those who do work that requires strength. All of them are dependent on earth. All are established on earth. In other words, the physicality of our body is what makes it possible to do physical work. In this way, they do work that requires strength. In the same way, Sir Gotama, a person has the body as self, and established on the body, he acquires merit or demerit. A person has feeling as self, recognition as self, thoughts as self, and consciousness as self. And established on feeling, recognition, thoughts, and consciousness, he accrues merit or demerit. So in other words, Saccaka is saying that just as plants grow up dependent on the earth, based on the earth, and just as people do physical work based on the strength of their body, In the same way, we have body, feelings, recognition, thoughts, and consciousness as our self-nature, as our true being. And based on that, we accumulate karma. That's what Saccaka is saying. And the Buddha replies, Agivesana, do you not therefore say, the body is myself, feelings are myself, recognition is myself, thoughts are myself, consciousness is myself? Sir Gautama, I say the body is myself, feelings are myself, recognition is myself, thoughts are myself, consciousness is myself, and so does the majority of the populace. The Buddha replies, Agivesana, what can the majority of the populace do for you? Agivesana, surely you can explain your own assertion. In other words, the Buddha is saying, don't appeal to popular opinion. The Buddha is saying, it's you and me engaging in discussion. So you need to explain your own points. You can't just say, well, most people believe this, therefore it's true. You need to defend your own standpoint. You need to explain it yourself. One of the Buddhist things my dad used to say is, truth is not determined by popular vote. In other words, just because a lot of people believe something doesn't mean it's true. And actually, from a Buddhist standpoint, most people are phenomenally delusional, which means popular opinion is almost certainly not particularly accurate. So Saccaka then doubles down on his statement. He says, Sir Gautama, I say the body is myself, feelings are myself, recognition is myself, thoughts are myself, consciousness is myself. So he keeps the same viewpoint. And the Buddha answers, therefore, Agivesana, I will ask you a counter question about exactly that. Answer as you consider appropriate. What do you think, Agivesana? Can a consecrated royal king exercise control in his own realm to execute, fine, or exile those who are to be executed, fined, or exiled? For example, King Pasenadi of Kosala or King Ajatasattu Vedehiputta of Magadha. By the way, the fact that he refers to Ajatasattu as a king indicates that this was towards the end of the Buddha's life. Minor detail, which has no relevance whatsoever to the content of the sutta. But this allows us to date the sutta as being towards the end of the Buddha's life. And Saccaka replies, Sir Gautama, a consecrated royal king can exercise control in his own realm to execute, fine, or exile those who are to be executed, fined, or exiled, such as King Pasenadi of Kosala or King Ajatasattu Vedehiputta of Magadha. Sir Gautama, even those who are ruled by a group, such as the Vajjis or the Malins, so these apparently were republics or oligarchies, exercise control in their own realm to execute, fine, or exile those who are to be executed, fined, or exiled. But what of consecrated royal kings, such as King Pasenadi of Kosala or King Ajatasattu Vedehiputta of Magadha? Sir Gautama, they exercise control, and they are worthy to exercise control. So Saccaka agrees with the Buddha that a king has power within their own realm. And Saccaka even goes one step farther and says that kings are worthy to exercise control. It is proper, it is appropriate that they have control in their own kingdom. So apparently Saccaka was a royalist, which is a minor side issue. So then the Buddha replies, what do you think, Agivesana? You say the body is myself. Do you exercise control in that body, determining, may my body be like this, may my body not be like that? When this was said, Saccaka was silent. A second time, the Blessed One said to Saccaka, what do you think, Agivesana? You say the body is myself. Do you exercise control in that body, determining, may my body be like this, may my body not be like that? For a second time, Saccaka was silent. Then the Blessed One said to Saccaka, answer now, Saccaka. This is not the time for you to be silent. agivesana. If someone does not answer when he has been asked a question that accords with the Dhamma by a Tathagata for the third time, his head will immediately split into 7 pieces. So the Buddha here is, the question he's asking is backing Saccaka into a corner. And Saccaka knows this, so he's trying to avoid answering. So the Buddha, so basically what the Buddha is saying is, well, if your body is you, then you should be able to have full control over it. Do you have full control over it? Can you order your body to stop getting old? Can you order your body to never get sick? Can you order your body to be tall or short, thin or fat, pale or dark? Can you order your hair to grow or to shorten? Can you command your body to sprout wings? Do you have complete control over your body? And the answer is, of course, no, of course not. The body seems to just do whatever it wants to do for the most part. We have very limited influence on our body. We can make coarse actions with the body, but most bodily functions are happening automatically without our influence or control. So this backs Saccaka into a rather difficult position where he needs to explain how it is that his true self is mostly out of his own control. So he's trying to avoid answering. And here we also have this interesting statement that if a Tathagata asks somebody a question in line with the Dhamma 3 times, and the person doesn't answer, then their head will explode. This is mentioned a few places in the suttas. So if a Buddha ever asks you a question, answer. At least answer the 2nd time, but don't remain silent. And the sutta continues. On this occasion, the spirit Vajrapani was standing in the sky above Saccaka, holding a lightning bolt that was on fire, blazing and radiant, thinking, if this Saccaka does not answer when asked a question that accords with the Dhamma by the Blessed One for the 3rd time, then I will immediately split his head into 7 pieces. Both the Blessed One and Saccaka saw the spirit Vajrapani. Then Saccaka was frightened, terrified, with his hair standing on end, seeking protection in the Blessed One, seeking safety in the Blessed One, seeking refuge in the Blessed One. He said to the Blessed One, let Sir Gautama ask me, I will answer. The poor guy is really scared. So Vajrapani was a deva who, this might actually be the only place that Vajrapani appears in the Pali Canon. But Vajrapani later appears in Vajrayana Buddhism, where Vajrapani has a much more prominent role as a bodhisattva. But in the suttas, he's mentioned quite briefly. So Vajrapani literally means lightning hand. So then the Buddha asks Agivesana, asks Saccaka again. He says, what do you think, Agivesana? You say the body is myself. Do you exercise control in that body, determining, may my body be like this, may my body not be like that? Certainly not, Sir Gautama. Oh, poor Saccaka. And the Buddha replies, pay attention, Agivesana. Answer after paying attention, Agivesana. What you said before does not connect with what you said afterwards, nor what you said afterwards with what you said before. In other words, the Buddha is pointing out, he's saying you're contradicting your earlier statement. Earlier you said the body is myself, and then you said a king can exercise control in his own realm, but now you're admitting that you actually don't have any control over your own body, which indicates that it can't possibly be your true self. It can't possibly be who you really are. It can't possibly be what you really are. And then the Buddha asks him the same question about the other 4 khandhas. He says, what do you think, Agivesana? You say feelings are myself, recognition is myself, thoughts are myself, consciousness is myself. Do you exercise control in feelings, recognition, thoughts, and consciousness, determining, may they be like this, may they not be like that? And in each case, the answer is certainly not, Sir Gautama. And the Buddha says, pay attention, Agivesana. Answer after paying attention, Agivesana. What you said before does not connect with what you said afterwards, nor what you said afterwards with what you said before. And here the Buddha goes through a excerpt which is quite similar to the Anattā Lakkhana Sutta, for those who are familiar with the Anattā Lakkhana Sutta. So he says, what do you think, Agivesana? You say, feelings are myself, recognition is myself. Oh, wait, I just read that. He says, what do you think, Agivesana? Is the body permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Sir Gautama. Is that which is impermanent a source of suffering or a source of happiness? A source of suffering, Sir Gautama. Is it appropriate to regard that which is impermanent a source of suffering and subject to alteration as this is mine, I am this is myself? He replies, certainly not, Sir Gautama. And the Buddha asks the same question in regard to each of the other four khandhas. So this is pointing to three aspects of the khandhas, which the Buddha says indicates that they're not our true self. First off, they're impermanent. So our sense of self continues even though the body and the components of mind keep changing. So that means that we are not any of those components of body or mind. None of them can be who we are because they're different moment by moment. So a simple way to look at this is if right now you were to go through every piece of your body and mind and put a label on it with your name, and then you wait a little bit and check, you would find that everything that you had labeled with your name is gone. There's something else there, which might be relatively similar or might not be, but whatever you had labeled is gone. So clearly that wasn't you. So then what we do is that then we, once again, label everything in body and mind as me. And then we wait a moment and it's all gone and there's something else there. And we're like, well, I guess this must be me. So we label everything me and we wait a moment and it's gone, etc., etc. So the Buddha is just pointing out the absurdity of this. The absurdity of labeling something which is clearly impermanent as being me. He also points to the fact that since these things are impermanent, then clinging to them produces dukkha. Trying to rely on them produces dukkha, produces unhappiness, produces suffering, dissatisfaction. So this also indicates that it's not our true self. This can't be who we really are. And finally, again, it's subject to alteration. And the Pali word here is viparinama, which implies not just an ordinary alteration, but a dramatic, unpleasant, disastrous alteration, a catastrophe. So body and mind are subject to catastrophe. The body can get terribly ill or maimed or dismembered, and of course, eventually it dies. The components of mind can malfunction. Yesterday, Bhante J was talking about trauma. So trauma is a serious damage to our mental functioning. We can experience different degrees of neurosis or psychosis, which also are quite catastrophic forms of damage to our mental processes. So since body and mind are subject to catastrophic alterations, that also indicates that it can't be who we really are. So the Buddha goes through body and mind, and then he says, what do you think, Agivesana? If someone adheres to a source of suffering, stays close to a source of suffering, clings to a source of suffering, and regards a source of suffering as this is mine, I am this is myself, could he personally understand suffering or abide having completely discarded suffering? He replies, how could it be so, Sir Gautama? Certainly not, Sir Gautama. Whereas Saccaka, he thought he was going to defeat the Buddha, but the Buddha is defeating him quite badly. He thought he was going to drag the Buddha about with words, but the Buddha is dragging him about with words. There's another sutta where somebody was going to go and debate with the Buddha, and then his friends told him, dude, that's a really bad idea. Don't do it. Don't go and debate with the Buddha. When people debate with the Buddha, they lose. And the guy is like, how could I possibly lose? My opinions are unassailable. And he goes and debates with the Buddha and loses. And then winds up becoming a Buddhist at the end. And all his friends were like, oh, we told you. You didn't listen. Anyway, it's dangerous to debate with the Buddha if you're attached to your wrong views. If you're not attached to your wrong views, it's a great thing to debate with the Buddha because it will bring you closer to the truth. So the example the Buddha is giving here is if we're clinging to dukkha, if we think that dukkha is me, if we think it's mine, if we think it's our true self, then how could we possibly understand dukkha? And how could we possibly let go of dukkha? Because this is actually what we're doing. When we identify body and mind as me, as mine, as myself, all we're doing is just clinging to dukkha. We're just holding desperately to our own suffering. It doesn't do us any good, and it doesn't produce any wisdom. We need to be willing to recognize dukkha as dukkha, and willing to let go of it, willing to get past it. So then the Buddha says, what do you think, Agivesana? Are you not the same? One who adheres to a source of suffering, stays close to a source of suffering, clings to a source of suffering, and regards a source of suffering as this is mine, I am this is myself. And he replies, how could it not be so, Sir Gautama? It is just like that, Sir Gautama. So Saccaka here also he quite honestly admits that his doctrine of self, of seeing body and mind as self, is just causing him dukkha. It's not doing him any good. So I think it's probably time to pause there and switch to questions if there's any questions. Do we have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We don't have any questions yet, but we have a few other friends who have joined us so far. So welcome to Yenny, Jacqueline, Melinda, Suzanne, Sarah. And Yen says, Bhante, the example of the labeling aspects of self is a great explanation. Thank you. And so Galaxy from Malaysia is here. Hello. And Michael had mentioned at the very beginning, and karma only happens with intention. So what gives here? I'm not sure.
I don't understand the question. Maybe if you rephrase the question.
Right. Okay. So we'll wait for a few minutes to see if there's any comments or questions from people.
A few seconds, maybe.
Well, minutes are made of seconds, so.
Yes, right.
Do you remember the sutta where the Buddha talks about, like he's talking about not self, and he gives like an example of leaves in the forest?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the sutta that comes to mind is one where it starts off with the Buddha saying, monks, abandon what is not yours. He says, and what is not yours? The body is not yours, feeling is not yours, recognition is not yours, thoughts are not yours, consciousness is not yours. And he says, just as if somebody were to come and gather up all the sticks and leaves in the forest and then carry them away or destroy them or burn them, would you think they're carrying me away? They're destroying me, they're burning me? And the monks say, well, no, of course not. And the Buddha said it's the same way. Body and mind are not yours. They're not you. Abandon them, let go of them. Yeah. Yeah, I've always loved that particular simile, and the statement of the Buddha, like, abandon that which is not yours. And what is not yours? Body and mind. Yeah. Anything from the live chat?
Yes, and apparently YouTube is being funny and censoring part of Michael's question, which is why we only saw the second part about karma. So maybe, Michael, if you can try and rephrase it. Sometimes Google has a weird automatic censor thing.
Yeah,
apparently,
a while back it was deleting the word nibbana.
Yeah.
Whenever someone would type nibbana, it would erase their question.
Clear sign that we're close to the apocalypse.
Yeah.
So Sarah asks, how do you deal with the disconnection an illness can give you? How not to get trapped in aversion to the body or dukkha or guess?
Well, first off, it's important to be clearly aware of the sensations that are happening. So not to try to suppress or ignore the sensations, but to be clearly aware of them with equanimity. So knowing what's going on in the body and recognizing that it's a natural process of the body. And recognizing that we make a choice whether or not to suffer about it. We make a choice whether or not to react with negativity to it. And this has really helped if you have a lot of samadhi. So it's good to practice samadhi because it really helps you with dealing with those sorts of difficult experiences. Cultivate mindfulness and equanimity at all times, especially mindfulness of the body at all times. And also constantly remind yourself. The Buddha said we should remind ourselves every day that we're subject to illness. We're not exempt from illness. We're subject to decay. We're not exempt from decay. And we're subject to dying. We're not exempt from dying. So we should remind ourselves of this all the time so that when unpleasant things happen with the body, we're not surprised by it. We're just like, oh, it's just the body doing what bodies do. Bodies get sick, bodies decay, and bodies die. That's just what they do. So reminding ourselves that this is the nature of the body. There's not anything wrong. It's like when a tree grows old and it starts losing its leaves and the limbs start drying out and falling off, and eventually the tree topples over. We're not like, oh, something's drastically wrong. We just recognize that's what trees do when they get old. Well, it's the same with our body. The nature of our body is that it's prone to malfunctioning. Our body is this like walking mass of putrefying flesh filled with bacteria and microbes. Like, why would we be surprised that it sometimes doesn't work correctly? We should be surprised that it actually works correctly most of the time. The surprising thing is that the body actually operates relatively well. That's the surprising thing. I remember reading a science article a few years back about bipeds, so the way humans walk. And what they were saying is that it is massively improbable that a two-legged being can walk. It is ridiculously unlikely. Phenomenally improbable that a two-legged being can walk upright. And yet somehow we do it. So we should actually be surprised at how well the body works most of the time. We should not be surprised at the times when it doesn't work very well.
Thank you. That was interesting. And and yes, Michael, we are continuing this sutta tomorrow. So if you want to ask them tomorrow, that's totally fine. And Mehmet says, yesterday, while discussing the Vitakasantana Sutta, we said that enlightenment is gaining full control over one's thoughts. Using the logic in this sutta, wouldn't an awakened person be able to call his thoughts as his or himself then?
So First off, I wouldn't necessarily say that enlightenment means complete control over thoughts, but rather what the Buddha is talking about in the Vitakasantana Sutta is getting complete control over the intentional thinking process. So I think that's a little bit different from control over sankharas. So the word that in this sutta is translated as thoughts is the word sankhara. Sankhara, which is, it's often translated mental formations, mental activities, mental objects, which is a bit broader of a category. Thoughts is a bit narrow. So thoughts are one form of sankhara, one form of mental phenomena, but they're not all, doesn't include all mental sankharas. So an arhat recognizes sankharas, recognizes that they're not self, recognizes that they're impermanent and dukkha, and is not affected by them. So it's not necessarily that they have complete control over them, but rather that they're not affected by them. That's what I would say.
All right, and that's all for this morning. Thank you so much, Bhante, for teaching us. And we will be meeting again this evening for meditation and Dhamma talk. And tomorrow morning, again, for Sutta study, we will be studying the second part of this Sutta. And we will have meetings until Friday. And then starting next week, only Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, both morning and evenings. So less is more, but you can still tune in 3 times a week, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, 8 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. as usual. All right, have a great sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.